Asmat Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Parama Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Sarva Gurubhyo Namaha. So we're going to continue on with our reading of Vaishnavism, its philosophical doctrines. What is it? Vaishnavism, its philosophy, theology, and religious discipline by S.M. Srinivasachari, S.M.S. Chari. And last time we got through the preface and the introduction. Now we're just going to go straight to the first chapter, which is History of Vaishnavism. So let's have a look at the text, Historical Development of Vaishnavism. Now, for everybody who's watching, historical development of Vaishnavism is going to try and, of course, the adherents of Vaishnavism, the Vaishnavas, the people who follow Vaishnavism as a religion, as a philosophy, we feel that Vaishnavism is very old or is eternal. But if we're looking from a more of an academic point of view, academics will look and they'll always look and they'll try to look at the history. But even Vaishnava scholars, even scholars who are Vaishnavas, they try to look at the historical development of Vaishnavism, right? So, so let's begin. Vaishnavism is one of the oldest living religions in India. Is basically a monotheistic system that upholds Vishnu as the ultimate reality, or Paratattva. The word tattva means principle, para means supreme. So Paratattva means the supreme principle. The supreme principle is Vishnu. Now, the word monotheistic in this first sentence is a little bit misleading because as soon as we say monotheistic, we tend to think of religions like Christianity, Islam, Judaism, which are the monotheistic religions that we know about mostly in the West, because they're Abrahamic religions. They all have the Old Testament as a basic foundation, and then they have other things like the Quran, other scriptures like the Quran and the New Testament added on to them. And then there are, of course, other sects which add on other scriptures, the Book of Mormon, there are different things that people add on like that. But they're all based on one original scripture, the Old Testament, which is a monotheistic text and talks about one God, this one supreme God. So, of course, Vaishnavas are also like that. We believe that there is one supreme person, supreme God, or one, we can call him the cause or the greatest person, like that. And in that sense, we're also monotheistic. But monotheism, what does monotheism mean? Mono means one, and theo means God. So one God, rather than having many, many gods. When what is the opposite to monotheism is pantheism. Pantheism or polytheism, let's say. Polytheism means many gods. There's many, many gods. And pantheism means there's a God for the mountain, there's a God for the tree, there's a God for the river, there's so many different gods like that. And meaning that they're all considered supreme. And if I have a particular purpose, I worship one of them, or I worship another one of them, depending on my purpose, but they're all equal. This is very similar, but not exactly the same, to the system of the Advaitins or the Smartas in India, who believe that there's one supreme Brahman, which has no distinct qualities, but can manifest in different ways, like that, as different.
Excuse Swami.
Yeah.
Would you say that so Hinduism, as it is today, would you say that is pantheism then? Because that's kind of like what it is. There's a God for everything, and according to your purpose, you go for it. So like the way Hinduism is practiced nowadays is kind of like pantheism. Would you say so?
Well, maybe people would maybe say polytheism. The concept of the Western Indologists, when they came to India, they thought the thinking is, when most people talk about Hinduism today, they consider it more to be like polytheism, that there are many gods, there are many different gods, and people worship. Now, amongst the Hindus, amongst different Hindus, Hinduism is a catchphrase for all sorts of people who follow all sorts of different theologies. But basically, the philosophy underlying Hinduism I would say is Advaita Vedanta. Now, of course, there are some Hindus who are not Advaitins. They're not Smartas. They are Vaishnavas or Shaivas or Shaktas, or there are different groups. But the biggest group, and in general is a Smarta group, the Advaitin group, the followers of Shankaracharya's philosophy, Advaita, which means non-dualism or monism. So in a sense, we can say, that's why I'm saying monotheism is also a little bit misleading, because monotheism and monism, what's the difference? Monism sees that there's one God. Monotheism says there's one God. The difference between monotheism and monism, or Advaita, or non-dualism, right, is that monotheism is the theology, and it talks about one God, and it sort of understands that God is somewhat personal. Although in Christianity we talk about they talk about a personality of God, and they talk also about an impersonal force which they call the Holy Spirit or the Holy Ghost. But still they're talking about one God. The Advaitins are also talking about one God. The Vaishnavas are also talking about one God. So, but there's a difference in the sense that the Advaitic concept of God, of one God, is one Brahman, one energy, one impersonal thing, which encompasses everything. Whereas the monotheism is really a theological term. It's not a philosophical term. Monotheism means there's one God, but it doesn't describe that God, right? It doesn't describe that God and his relationship to the world and to the souls, or to the Atmans, the individual Atman, or the Chaitana and Achaitana. It doesn't describe philosophically. It's more or less a theological badge that is put on different religions. So they say this one's monotheistic, this one's, in India, the religions are all philosophically based. So you might find that there's a monotheistic Shaivism, there's a monotheistic Vaishnavism, there's a monotheistic, Shaktism, right? But they're all separate theologies, they're all separate religions. Whereas, the Western concept of religion is a little bit limiting because it doesn't go deeply into philosophy. So even amongst Christians, amongst Buddhists even, right, amongst Jews and amongst Muslims, Islamic people, right, they have their religions, but they actually have different sects that have different takes on the religion. And sometimes they have different philosophical ideas. So, whereas in India, people tend to start from philosophy and work to theology. So they start off, and if you start off in India, if you want to divide people up, you want to find out what is their philosophy, and then find out what theology they practice, what is their practical religion that they practice on top of that philosophical axiom or philosophical basis. Okay, so yeah, pantheism is one thing. There's a lot of different theisms. We don't have time to go through all the different permutations of the word theist. But let's say, look, a theist believes in some sort of cause to the universe. In that case, we can also say scientists are also theists because they believe in a cause. They believe in a cause. So everybody who believes in a cause or believes in some creator or something that creates everything, something out of which everything is created, that is a cause of all causes. That is theism. But exactly what the relationship between that cause is and what is caused, what is created, means the living beings and the universe, that is not described in these terms. So pantheism tends to be something like the Druids in England, and there are different groups that believe, different tribal groups that believe in types of, and you could say that the Westerners, when they came to India, they had this idea that they could have described Hinduism as being pantheistic, or they could have described it as being polytheistic. Mostly, you find the older books by Indian Indologists as saying that Hinduism is pantheistic. It's polytheistic, that they have many different gods, and that all of these gods they consider to be supreme. But if you really look at Hinduism, Hindus don't really think that every god is supreme. But they, unless maybe you're talking about Balinese Hinduism, it tends to be more like that. But they just tend to say, okay, there's these different aspects of God, and he or she appears in a certain aspect, and we worship for a certain purpose. So I have a certain God for a certain purpose, and another God for another purpose, or another name for God for another purpose. Now, of course, the Vaishnavas have this idea that all of these names belong to the Supreme, and that if we consider other different personalities, they're simply like limbs of that Supreme. They're just like parts of that Supreme. It's like if we're not considering the whole person, we're just considering a portion of that person. If we need the person's help with his hands or with his eyes or with his mouth or with his legs, then we consider that part separate, and we worship that part separately. So there's lots of different concepts here. But let's get on and let's talk about. Okay, so he's used this word monotheistic, and we have other words also. Another word that's going to come up is panentheistic, which is different from pantheistic. Pan means all. Pan means all. So pantheism means God in all. It means God is all. God is all. All is God. Right? Panentheism, en means in. So panentheism is different. It means all in God inside all. And all inside, we can also say all inside God. So that's more or less Ramanuja's philosophy. But there are some other religions in the world that also tend to be pantheistic. But anyway, we're talking about Vaishnavism here. So its relationship to Hinduism, we can say in general, for general people's consumption, Vaishnavism is a sect of Hinduism. It's a type of theological and philosophical and theological subsect of Hinduism. Hinduism is a catchphrase that people use for anybody who follows the Vedas, basically, in any way, shape, or form. Which it means it's a very big catchphrase, Hinduism. So like that. And of course, many people in India don't like the term Hinduism because it tends to be geographic. Because Hinduism, in a strict sense, comes from the word Sindhu, which is a river which flows in North India, or used to flow in North India, and therefore the people who lived around that area are called Hindus. So really, Hinduism doesn't, that's not a very good description, because now, of course, we have people, so-called Hindus, who live all over the world. There's an Indian diaspora, and also we have in Southeast Asia, we have forms of Hinduism which are not any longer rooted in India, but have originally come from India. And there are many religions that have come from India. Jainism, Buddhism, these things have all come from India. So just to say that a religion comes from a certain part of India and to describe it like that it's like calling all Buddhist sects Gaiaism. It's not a good description. Okay, so the word Hindu is not a good description, but it's the one that a lot of people used for the last couple of hundred years, or including today, right? So we can occasionally use it because that's what people use in general. But people in India a lot of people tend to say we don't like the word Hinduism. We would prefer the word Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana means eternal, and Dharma means religion or religiosity. So, okay, that's nice, but that's also not very descriptive, because you find these other religions, they also say, well, our religion's eternal, our God is eternal, our ideas are eternal. So they all have that idea. So here we're talking about the history of the development of Vaishnavism in particular, which is not exactly Hinduism and not exact, but in any case, we'll go on. We don't want to get hung up too much on terminology. So I see he's not going to use the word Hinduism, it seems like, right? But he is using the term Vaishnavism, and Vaishnavism again is a catchphrase for different sects of people, all of whom hold Vishnu as their supreme principle. Now, how they hold Vishnu as a supreme principle, that's another question, and that may differ from Vaishnav sect to Vaishnav sect. Some of them see him as Krishna or Radha Krishna, some of them see him as Lakshmi Narayana, some of them see him as Sita Ram, some of them see him as Narasimha, some of them see him as, you might even call Shankaracharya Vaishnava because even though he sees Vishnu as a form of Brahman, like that, still, so all of these things can be termed as types of Vaishnavism. And therefore, we're talking about Vaishnavism in general, and we're going to get specific as we go along. So anyway, so Vaishnavism in general as a catchphrase for all different Vaishnava groups, right? Vaishnavism in general upholds Vishnu or a form of Vishnu, right, as the ultimate reality, the Paratattva. It believes in that the exclusive and devoted worship of Vishnu leads to the realization of the highest spiritual goal, right? And that is called in Sanskrit, Parama Purusha. Again, we have Para or Parama. The word means supreme or topmost, right? Purushartha, the word artha means goal or purpose or gain. And we can say goal in this sense, goal. And Purusha means of human beings, of man, right? Meaning men and women, meaning all human beings. All human beings have goals. And the goals described in the Vedic literature are basically four for human beings. They're called the goals, arthas of the Purushas, of the people's goals, right? Purusharthas. That means they are listed as dharma, artha, kama, moksha, right? So religiosity, gratifying the senses, sense gratification, economic development, artha, so kama and artha, then moksha. Moksha is liberation from material suffering and the cycle of birth and death. So now, so Vaishnavism in general prescribes some sort of exclusive and devoted worship of Lord Vishnu in different ways, right? And they say that leads to the highest spiritual goal, which is the supreme Purushartha, which is usually considered the fourth one, not dharma, artha, and kama, not religiosity, just ordinary religiosity, not just economic development, not just sense gratification, but beyond that thing, transcendental goal of liberating ourselves or getting beyond this material world of birth and death and cycle of samsara. So, and for this purpose, it is laid down an ethical and religious discipline. Okay, so there's Vaishnava scriptures that have given us the actual functionary methods by which the doctrines and practices by which the Vaishnavas live and want to attain this ultimate goal of life, which is moksha. Right. So the origin of Vaishnavism can be traced back to the Rig Veda. The Rig Veda is the oldest scripture known to man. And the Vedas are considered historically, or by Vaishnava scholars and even academic scholars. I don't know about academic scholars, but anyway, at least by Vaishnava scholars, they're considered to have been one thing, one body of knowledge in the beginning, and that then they were divided up into four sections called Rig, Yajus, Sama, and Atharva, like that. And that division was supposed to have been done by a person called Vyasa, the compiler. So Veda Vyasa. Veda means knowledge. And so here when we say Rig Veda, we're talking about that part. that particular part is considered the oldest part by most people, by most scholars, even Vaishnava scholars and Western scholars. So the Rig Veda has a specific Samhita section, which you can look at. It also has other sections for Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and Samhita Upanishads that are connected to that section. We'll go into that a little bit later, probably. So the oldest religious literature of the world. Tradition, however, ascribes its origin, right, to oral teachings imparted by Vishnu himself to goddess Lakshmi, and in turn to Vishvaksena. Okay, so the idea is, if we're going to talk about the origin, first of all, we can say it's the oldest. The Rig Veda is the oldest religious literature known to man. But traditionally, people think of the Vedas as being taught, or the knowledge of the Vedas being taught by the Lord, Sriman Narayana, to his consort, Lakshmi, his wife, Lakshmi, right? And in turn to Vishvaksena, who is considered like a secretary of Lord Vishnu, like this, in the Vaishnava heaven, which is called Vaikuntha. Right. So he calls Vishvaksena here the divine angel, so some sort of angel, so that people can understand what it means. So judged on the basis of the extant recorded literature, what literature that we have, we can find in the Rig Veda adequate and unquestionable evidence for the basic tenets of Vaishnavism. So if we look in the Vedas, in the Rig Veda, we can find the tenets of Vaishnavism. There is sufficient number of hymns in the Rig Veda, some of which are also repeated in the Yajurveda and Samaveda, that speak of Vishnu as the highest personal God, who is the sole creator and controller of the universe and the savior of humanity. The Western Indologists and some Indian scholars have, however, taken the view that Vishnu mentioned in the Rig Veda is just one amongst several deities such as Agni, Rudra, Prajapati, Indra, Varuna, Soma, etc., and that Vishnu is therefore not a supreme deity. So there are some scholars in India and even Western scholars who think like this, that they see different hymns which are addressed to the Supreme having different names, and therefore they take each of these names to be separate personalities, each of these named deities to be separate personalities. A dispassionate study of the hymns related to Vishnu on the basis of interpretations by ancient commentators. So we have to look also at the commentators on the Vedas. Sometimes when you have a literature which is very terse, which is very complex, it's not very clear, then you have to take the understanding, the realization that's come from certain ancient commentators to explain it. So Yaksha is one commentator. We also have a commentary by I forget, Nilakanta, and also there's a few commentaries on the original Vedas themselves. Okay, so anyway, so he says by ancient commentators such as Yaksha and Exponents of Vedanta, right, which is the philosophical portion of the Vedas can sometimes be divided into two areas of concern. The first is called Karmakanda, or it's called Purvamamsa, which means the initial discussion. Karmakanda means the discussion on activities, on actual rituals. So the ritualistic section, and also then there's the Upasana Kanda or the Jnana Kanda. The Jnana Kanda means the knowledge section, which is the Upanishads, the books of philosophical learning. Upasana Kanda means the worship, the system of worship, right? So if we read those, those are the two basic sections of the Vedas by topic that we can understand. So the exponents of Vedanta, they talk about that mostly the second section, the Upanishads. So here we're still talking about the Rig Veda, which is normally just we consider the Samhita section of the Veda, right? Bring out and exponents of Vedanta bring out the true implications of the Vedic statements and reveal beyond a doubt that the view of indulgence is not correct. Right. So he's saying that he doesn't, we shouldn't, the speculations of Western or even Indian Indologists that say that that there are all these different supreme gods mentioned in the Vedas, and therefore the Vedas are polytheistic. That's not correct. So let's look at monotheism in the Rig Veda. And he's going to now talk about why he thinks in the Rig Veda you can clearly see a monotheistic point of view, a point of view that there is amongst these gods one supreme god, or that all these names particularly mean one supreme god. Before we take up the import of selected hymns of the Rig Veda, which support the above conclusion, we should examine whether the religion of the Rig Veda can be considered monotheistic, upholding the theory of one supreme being. The common view of many Indologists is that the Vedic religion is polytheistic, right? So we understand polytheistic means there are many gods, there are many supreme gods. The basis for this view is that the hymns of the Rig Veda speak of numerous deities, right? Different personalities, or different gods with a small g, we would say in English. If we put with a capital G, we mean one supreme god. If we put small g's, there are small gods. We will call them devatas. In Sanskrit, we call them devatas. These are higher beings. Right, so the basis for the view that the hymns of the Rig Veda speak of numerous deities, devatas, with diverse characteristics. Right, each deity is described as having an individuality and a distinct status. According to one hymn, the number of devatas is 3,339. Right, and so there's a footnote here. There's a footnote here. Okay, so he puts all the footnotes at the end of the chapter. So what I'll do is I'll just flip to the end of the chapter, and I'll be able to tell you as we go along. So footnote one. Okay, so he's quoted here Rig Veda 399. Trini Sata, Trini Sahasran, Yagnim, Trimschacha Deva, Nava, Kasha Palyan. See also Rig Veda 10:52-6. Okay, so in another place in the Rig Samhita, right, the deities are divided into three groups. Number one, those who dwell in the heavens, called Dhyaloka, right? Dhyal means a view here, but the word Dhyal means the sky, right? Who dwell in the sky, right? The word Loka means, some people translate the word Loka as planet, but we can see it means a location, basically. So we get the word in English, actually, from this word Loka, we get the word location. So those who dwell in the heavens. Two, those whose abode is the mid-region, Antariksha. Antariksha is sometimes translated as outer space, right? So maybe the heavens are considered even beyond outer space. And three, those that reside on earth, Prithvi. So this is this second quotation. He's quoting Rig Veda 139:11 and also Rig Veda 134:11. So their total number is counted as 33, 11 for each region. Now, so now we're going to get 33 in total. So sometimes it's said to be 3, sometimes it's said to be 1, sometimes it's said to be 3, sometimes it's said to be 33, sometimes it's said to be here 3,339. There are many counts that we get in different parts of the Vedas for the number of deities. Their total number is counted as 33, 11 for each region. Therefore, on the face of it, it would appear that the religion of the Rig Veda cannot be considered monotheistic, and that it would be difficult to attempt to accept the supremacy of Vishnu, right? So this is a counter argument. The way that normally the discussion goes along in India is that we put forth a proposal, and then we look at all the counter arguments, and then ultimately we look at the one argument which is overriding all of those, and we come to a conclusion of which argument is correct. So this is a counter argument. to the idea that is Vishnu supreme. So there is a significant statement in Taittiriya Upanishad. Now, Taittiriya Upanishad is connected to the Yajurveda, right? Which provides an answer to the issue whether or not the Rig Veda teaches monotheism. It states, Maha is Brahman, the supreme self, and all other devatas, deities, constitute its limbs or aspects. And this quotation is from Taittiriya Upanishad 115. Maha iti tad brahma sa'atma angan yan ya devataha. Right? So that's a statement in the Taittiriya Upanishad. So as I said, the Upanishads give us the philosophical understanding of the Vedas. So here, this is a good pramana. This is a good proof to know from Taittiriya Upanishad. It's a proof to show that what is it saying here? It says Maha. The word Maha is used here as a name of Brahman. Brahman meaning the great one or the supreme spirit, the supreme self, and that all other deities, if we're talking about other deities, constitute it. Maha or Brahman's limbs or aspects, right? So this fact is reiterated in a more explicit way. This fact is reiterated in a more explicit way in the Mahabharata. Now, the Mahabharata is one of the epics. It points out that Narayana, the highest personal God, is the supreme being. All deities are created by him, and all other deities are therefore parts or angas of that one great being. So this quotation is coming from the Mahabharata 4.3.16, where he says, Narayanastu Purusho Vishvarupo Mahadyutir Narayanasya cha Angani Sarva Daivani cha Abhavan Anyani sarva daivani tasyangani mahatmanaha. Right? That's the quotation. And we can also find this quoted in a commentary on Olavanda's Stotraratna. Those of you who know Yamunacharya's poem called Stotraratna in Sanskrit, which means the jewel-like, the crest jewel of poetic verses. In the commentary on that, on page 40, I'm assuming he's saying here the commentary by Vedanta Deshika, right? You also find this quotation. Okay, so now another verse of the Mahabharata offers the same explanation, upholding the supremacy of Vishnu. Thus, it states, Vishnu is unique and is the unique and unparalleled deity. He's the supreme being. And the word used is Mahabhutam. In this case, Bhutam means a personality or a being. Mahad means great, the greatest. So this quotation, it says, he is the supreme being. The other countless beings, which are different from each other, exist as his different aspects. He pervades all the three worlds and controls them, but he himself is untouched by their defects. And this is a quotation from Mahabharata 13.255, 142. Eko Vishnuhu Mahadbhutam Pitag Bhutanyane Kashaha Trim Lokan Vyapta Bhutatma Mumte Vishvabhugavyayaha. Those of you who have been studying Vishnu Sahasranama, the 1,000 names of Vishnu, will note that I believe that this sloka comes in Vishnu Sahasranama, in the description of Vishnu Sahasranama. Eko Vishnu Mahadbhutam Pitak Bhutan Yanekashaha Trim Lokam Vyapti Bhutatma Bhunkte Vishvabhugavyayaha. Right? This is actually a quote from Mahabharata. Right? So it may come in as part of the Vishnu Sahasranama, which is part of the Mahabharata, the 1,000 names of Vishnu, which is part of the great epic called Mahabharata. Okay, so now we're continuing on. From these statements, it is obvious that the numerous deities referred to in the Rig Veda are no more than functional appellations. What I mean by functional appellations of the one fundamental reality. So there's one fundamental reality or supreme principle which is called Vishnu. Right. But these are just different names for Vishnu. These are just different names for that one personality functionally. Right. So, in other words, all the different names that we see in the Vedas actually mean the Supreme Lord. I'll give you another example of this. If we look in the English translation of Isa Upanishad given by the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, written by Swami Prabhupada, in the very last verse starts with the word Agni. So the word Agni is the locative singular of the noun Agni. Agni means fire. So Agni means oh fire, right? It's not locative, vocative. It's the vocative Sambodhana Pratama case, vibhakti of fire. Agni. Agni means oh Agni, right? So oh Agni means oh fire. So the translation given by Swami Prabhupada, the proper translation given by him is, "O Supreme Person who is powerful like fire." So when we pray to God and we call him "O Fire," we're not saying that the impersonal thing that we see in front of us, that when we light a match is the Supreme Person. We're not saying that fire itself is God. We're not saying that there's a demigod or there's a devata called Agni who is in charge of only fire, like that. But in the Vedas, when we use this word Agni, in many senses we actually mean, O Supreme Lord, who is powerful like fire. So these are three aspects, three ways of looking at the words or the names that are given to the devatas in the different hymns of the Vedas. Right. So superficially, Agni may seem like just a fire. And if we go a little deeper, we may think there's a god behind the fire, and that this god is different from other gods. But if we go to the deepest level, we understand that this god that is in charge of the fire is actually part of the limbs of a supreme god, a supreme principle, which is called Vishnu. Right? So Vishnu is the supreme, and the different limbs of him are the different devatas, the different personalities in charge of different aspects of reality, like that. So we can also consider that this word Agni is also addressing the Supreme Person, because it's addressing his qualities, and he's non-different from his qualities, right? So one of his qualities is the Devata Agni. So 3 or 33 or 3,000 are numbers to which it would be wrong to attach a literal significance. Okay, so here's a very first initial point that we need to understand, is that when we're discussing philosophy, sometimes when we read in the scriptures, we read something, then if we have to take the meaning literally, and other times so literally in the scriptures it talks about 3 gods, 33 gods, 3,033 gods. It talks about all these different numbers, but we don't take these things literally, because if we would take them literally, they would contradict each other, right? So when we find that there are different things that contradict each other, in order to rationalize that all of them are true, we have to understand them sometimes in a more analogous way, or we have to understand them in a figurative way, rather than understanding them in a literal way. So it will be wrong to attach a literal significance to the numbers of gods which are mentioned in the Upanishads or in the Vedas. They are to be understood as figures of speech adopted by the composers of the Vedic hymns to convey certain truths which the seers had realized. So the footnote here says he quotes another writer here called G.N. Chakravarti, the concept of cosmic harmony in the Rig Veda, page 18. This fact has been brought out by the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, which is Brihad means big, Aranyaka is a section of the Vedas, and Upanishad is also another section of the Vedas. So Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, one of the main Upanishads of the Vedas, in a dialogue between Sakalya and Yajnavalkya. Yajnavalkya is a very famous Vedic seer, and he's having this discussion. In In reply to a question addressed to the latter, Sakalya asked Yajnavalkya, right, by the former regarding the number of gods. The number 3,339 is reduced to 33. So Yajnavalkya says there are 3,339. Then he says that there are 33. Then he says that there are 3. Then he says that there are 2. Further, he says there are 1.5. And then he says, finally, there are 1. Each one of these numbers has a figurative or an analogous understanding, has a meaning behind it. But finally, we come to the final conclusion that there is only one God. That one deity is described by Yajnavalkya in this section as prana or Brahman. So in the Vedas and the Upanishads, Brahman, or the Supreme Person, is given many names. So one of them is prana. Prana means life air, the life air, or the living force, let's say, the living force. So God can also be called the living force. The same Upanishad further explains that this numerical description of God signifies the divine glories of the one ultimate reality. So there's one ultimate reality or supreme principle, and he has many, many aspects and many, many qualities. He has, some people say, the Advaitins say that Brahman has no qualities. Nirguna. Nirguna, the word guna means qualities. Nir means without. So, but the Vaishnavas and people who go deeper into this subject by studying these texts which are being described, right, they understand that the word nirguna means not without qualities totally, but without material qualities, without bad qualities, without adverse qualities, but only with supremely auspicious qualities. Right. His qualities are great qualities. They're auspicious and positive qualities. They're not negative. The ancient Vedic commentators, Yaksha and Shonaka, have adopted this explanation. So this, by the way, this quotation number 7 is from Brihad Aranyaka 592. Sahovacha mahimana evaishamete. The word mahimana is interpreted as glorious attributes. Okay, so that's the quotation there, or this Shastra Pramana. So now Shonaka, the author, Shonaka. So Shonaka, Yaksha, the ancient Vedic commentators Yaksha and Shonaka have adopted this explanation. According to Yaksha, the commentator Yaksha, there's only one supreme being, is sung differently, and all other deities are his different aspects. Right? This is also mentioned in Yaksha's Nirukta, right? Okay, so we have the Vedas and then we have the Vedangas. The Vedangas are ancillary or portions of the Vedas which help us to understand the Vedas. One of the Vedangas is called Nirukta. Nirukta means etymology. It means the meaning of words. The meaning of words. So this Vedanga, meaning of words, is called Nirukta. So here this quotation is from Yaksha's Nirukta 748, and it says Eka Atma Bahuda Stuyate. Bahuda means many, right? Eka Atma, one Atma or one supreme. In this verse here, the word Atma means the supreme. So the word Atma can mean both Jivatma, the individual, right, and or Paramatma, the supreme individual, right? So in this case, it's just word Atma, which means it can mean this either the supreme individual or the small individual, each one of us, right? So anyway, it says Eka Atma Bahuda Stuyate Ekasya Atmanaha Anye Deva Pratyangani Bhavanti. Bhavanti, everybody knows what the word Bhavanti means. It means they are, right? So, okay. So that's his quotation there from the Nirukta. Nirukta means he's giving etymology. So Yaksha has actually given the etymology of the words, of the different words, the different names in the Vedas to mean one supreme. And that's the quotation for that. So that's a very important pramana. So then the next thing is that Shonaka, so he's talking about Yaksha and Shonaka, these people who have commented on the Vedas. Shonaka is actually the author of another book called Brihad Devata. If anybody wants this book, Brihad Devata, it's available, not a problem. We can give you the ancient book called Brihad Devata. Now, what does Brihad Devata mean? Devata, of course, means the different gods, or the different aspects or qualities of the Supreme, right? And the different names, right? And Brihad means a great book. It's a great book of Devatas, a great book of different gods, right? Different deities, let's say. So what does it deal with? It deals with the deities that are there in the Rig Veda, or not just in the Rig Veda, but in the Vedas, completely in the different Vedas. It takes all the hymns of the Vedas, and each hymn, it tells you what is the deity. Because when we chant a hymn or when we chant a prayer, right, it's very important for us to know the deity or the different aspect of the Supreme Person, Vishnu, that it is addressing, right? We should know if we're going to use a word or if we're going to use a prayer, which form of the Lord is it addressing? So, for example, if we chant the Sri Suktam is a Vedic prayer, and the deity or the aspect of the Supreme which it addresses is Sri or Lakshmi. The aspect of the Supreme that is understood when we chant the Purusha Sukta is Lord Vishnu or Lord Narayana, like that. Okay, so here the Brihad Devata is a book, and it'll give you every Vedic mantra, and it'll tell you the rishi, it'll tell you the chandas, it'll tell you the seer, the sage who was the seer of that mantra, who understood that mantra in meditation and presented it to the world. The different poetic meter of that mantra, and it will tell you also the deity or the aspect of the Supreme which it applies to, which it addresses. Okay, so that's Brihad Devata. So Shonaka, the author of Brihad Devata, states, there is but one deity, there is but one Supreme. This deity has great powers, and by its special powers, it can assume many diverse forms. Hence, the primary reality, which is a single Atman of the universe, right? The soul of the universe, let's say, right? Is described and praised under different names. Those who are described separately are part of the one Paramatman, the one Supreme Person, which we understand as Vaishnavas to be Lord Vishnu or Lord Narayana. So that's a quote from Shonaka's Brihad Devata, right? And so we want to see Brihad Devata 170-71. So we can look up Brihad Devata, we can find that quote too. So people who ask us, is if people who say to us, no, the Vedas are polytheistic, they talk about all sorts of different gods. No, we have these two quotes from Yaksha and from Shonaka, which prove the ancient commentators, which tell us the actual underlying or esoteric meaning behind the different words, the different names that are used in the Vedas for different devatas. Right, there is but one deity. This deity has great powers, and its special powers, and by its special powers, it can assume many diverse forms. Hence, the primary reality, which is a single Atman, a single spirit, right, of the universe, is described and praised under different names. Those who are described separately are part of this one Paramatman. So Shayana, the well-known commentator on the Vedas, this is the other person I was trying to think of when I said Nilakanta before. I'm also thinking of Shayana, Nilakanta and Shayana. Nilakanta, I believe, has given a partial commentary on the Vedas, but Shayana has given a full commentary on the Vedas. He's very commonly quoted. Shayana is another comment. So we talked about Yaksha, we talked about Shonaka. Now we have Shayana. Shayana, the well-known commentator on the Vedas, also maintains the view that one Paramatman is praised through the different deities, through the names of these different deities that are given in the Vedas. Now, here we have all of the commentators on all the Vedas, all the ancient commentators are completely of one mind. They all have one opinion. There's no contradiction here. Everybody agrees that this is the point, like that. So that's why we have to understand the Vedas, and we have to understand many Vedic literatures with a commentary, because the commentators go deeply into the subject and they give the quotations, they explain the quotations, they give the inner meaning. And this is why we say sometimes we should not understand something literally by just looking up the dictionary meaning of the words. As I said with Isa Upanishad, if you look up dictionary meaning of Agni, it means "oh fire." It doesn't give you the sense of praying to God. But the prayer is to God. The prayer is to the supreme God, who is powerful like fire. So the word used is fire. Oh Agni, oh fire. Right? Agninaya Supataraya Sman Vishwani Deva Vayavani Vidvan Yudyo Jasmad Juhu Anamam Show Uyishtam Te Nama Uktim Videma is the very last verse of the Isopanishad, which comes as a part of the Yajurveda, of the Shukla Yajurveda Vajrasaneya Samhita. So the Isopanishad is sometimes called, it's the first amongst the 108 Upanishads. It's the most important, right? And why is it most important? Because it actually comes in part of the Samhita section, in the Samhita section of the Yajurveda. So that's why it's considered, sometimes it's called Samhita Upanishad, the Isopanishad, because it's so important. And so this last verse is very, very important. It's directly a verse of the Shukla Yajurveda Samhita. Right. So by giving this example, we understand that all these names given in of deities or devatas given in different Vedas really mean the one Paramatma. They're different aspects of the one Paramatma. So the quotation here, this footnote here is 10, is from the Bhashya, the commentary on the Vedas by Shayana, and it's from the preface of the Shayana Bhashya, and Shayana says, Tasmat Sarvairapi Parameshvara Eva Puyate. I think that's pretty easily understandable. That he's saying. So that is the quotation. So if people, again, this is a third Sanskrit pramana from a third commentator saying the same thing as Yaksha and Shonaka, that we can tell people why we believe that all of these names of different deities in the Vedas actually mean different aspects of the Supreme Paramatman, Sriman Narayana, Lord Vishnu. So the view expressed by the Vedic commentators and by the Mahabharata, so first of all by the Vedic commentators, also in the Mahabharata, which is another ancient literature compiled by Vedavyasa, right, which is sometimes called the fifth Veda, the Mahabharata. So it's very, very important as a commentary, as a pramana, as a proof, right, of the meaning of the Vedas, because the other books, like the other scriptures like the Itihasas, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, and the Sattvika Puranas, the Puranas which deal with the mode of goodness, which are 6 in number out of the 18 Mahapuranas, right? These which are histories. The Puran means older histories, right? The Itihasas are also histories, like that. These give us an understanding of parts of the Vedas that we don't understand because they're cryptic or they're terse, and therefore we should understand the meaning of the Vedas by understanding these books, by resorting to these books. So we're resorting to the commentators on the Vedas, and we're resorting also to the Mahabharata and other literature which explains the Vedas to us. So the view expressed by the Vedic commentators and the Mahabharata, which he quoted above, is not a later invention, as some scholars contend, to support the monotheism of the Rig Veda, right? So some scholars, they come and they say, okay, well, this idea was all made up later on. No, because it's there in the Mahabharata. It's there in the ancient commentaries by Shonaka, by Yaksha, and by Shayana. So there are hymns in the Rig Veda itself, though these are fewer in number, which explicitly speak of the existence of one supreme being. Okay, so now he's going to deal with hymns in the Veda itself. So, okay, let's say we give this argument to people about there being only one supreme person, right? One paratattva, one supreme principle, and we say, okay, that this is proved by the commentators, this is proved by the Mahabharata and the other. We give all these different quotes. We give quotes from Nirukta, we give quotes from from Shaina Bhashya, we give quotes from Brihad Devata, right? And still people say, no, we don't accept it. This must have come on later. Let's give quotes directly from the Vedas themselves about there being one supreme being. There are hymns in the Rig Veda itself, though they are fewer in number, right, which explicitly speak of the existence of one supreme being. Thus, an oft-quoted hymn says, there is one being, and that one being is called Sat, the eternal. So we may call God the eternal one, right? Sat. But wise men call it by different names. And this is a very, 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 very common quotation here. Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. Vadanti, I think anybody can understand this. Vadanti means they speak. Who speaks? The Vipras. Vipraha. Vipraha means the learned Brahmins. The people who are learned intellectuals, the people who are actually knowledgeable people, right? They speak. They speak of what? Ekam. They speak of the one, the eternal, Sat, right? They speak of that, Bahuda by many names. So this is really very simple Sanskrit like that. And this is coming directly from the Vedas, right? From the Upanishads. So this is a quotation from Rig Veda 1:164:46. So please note this down, right? If somebody says to you that the Vedas speak of many, many different gods, say, no, that's not true. It's not polytheism, right? Very simply, right there in the Rig Veda 1:164:46, it says, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti, and explain to them what, if you know a little bit of Sanskrit, even a very small bit of Sanskrit, you can understand the meaning of this quotation, right? This is not the only stray statement, but it's a very important one. This is not the only stray statement, but there are many others like this that are found in almost every mandala. The mandala is a part of the Rig Veda, right? So the Rig Veda has got, I believe it has 10 mandalas, and in the Purusha Sukta is found in the 10th mandala. It's the 90th sukta, or the 90th hymn of the 10th mandala. This is not the only stray statement, but there are many others of this kind found in almost every mandala or part of the Rig Veda. We may cite a few. In the very first mandala or part of the Rig Veda, we find another hymn stating that Surya meaning the sun, is the soul, right, or Atman of the universe, and its support. This quotation is from Rig Veda 1:115:1. Surya Atma Jagatas Tasta tu Shascha. Right? See also Shaina's commentary, or Shaina's Bhashya, volume 1, page 873, which states, Mandala Antara Arti Suryaha Antaryamitaya Sarvasya Prerakaha. And we can also note, Taittiriya Upanishad, Yascha Shao Aditye Saekaha. Right? This is Taittiriya Upanishad, which is a Krishna Yajurveda Upanishad. That also supports this proposal that he just said, right? That Surya is considered also. Now we also know that Surya is called Surya Narayana. Deya Sarasavati Mandala Madhyavarti Narayana Sarasijasana Sanivastake Yuravan Makarakundalavanti Hari Hiramaya Bhuti. The Sankha Chakra is a description of Surya Narayana, and the Savitri Gayatri, which is the Om Bhurvava Suvaha Tattavare Inyam Bhagode Vasidinahi Yoyona Patoria Ate, which comes from the Rig Veda. It's a Rig Veda hymn, is addressed to the sun, is addressed to Surya Narayana, or Narayana within the sun planet. He is called the Pratyaksha Devata, or the deity, that the form of God that we can see with our naked eyes, right? We can perceive him with our naked eyes. So Surya and Narayana in the Vedas themselves, they are associated with each other like that. This emphasizes the Upanishadic truth of the supreme deity within the orbit of the sun is the controller of the entire universe as an indweller of the sentient and non-sentient entities. And this is again pointing to the later explanation of this by Ramanuja as Sharira Shariri Bhava. Bhava means the understanding, right? That the Lord is relationship, the Supreme Person, Lord Narayana's or Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna's relationship to the world and to the souls is like that of a body and a soul. That the Lord is like the soul, and the souls and the universe of matter are like his body. So that is called Sharira Shariri Bhava. So that's what he's talking about here. He's saying that the Supreme Deity and Atma, in this sense, the Supreme Spirit, right, is seen as the Son, the controller of the entire universe, is the indweller of all sentient and non-sentient beings. What do we mean by that? We mean all the living beings, the individual living beings or souls, Atmans, and all the material universe, all the material universe of matter, sentient and non-sentient. In the third mandala, so that was in the first mandala of the Rig Veda. In the third mandala, the hymn emphasizes the oneness of the deity by stating that the wonderful divinity of gods is one. And this quotation is from Rig Veda 355.5. And that is Mahadeva Devanam Asurat Tvam Ekam. Ekam. I think we can understand the word Ekam here, right? And so that is a quotation from the third mandala of the Rig Veda, saying that the oneness of the deity, that emphasizes the oneness of the deity, that the worshipful divinity of gods is one, right? So continuing on, in the fourth mandala, there's an assertion by the sage Vamadeva, right, that I am Manu, I am Surya, I am indeed everything, refers to the unity of reality. So this quotation is from Rig Veda 4:26.1. And it's also from Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad 3:4.10. Okay? So we can look that up if we want to know the exact Sanskrit, right? So this sage Vamadeva is saying that. In the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, he's saying it. And also it's being stated directly in the Rig Veda. Right. So there's a unity of reality. A hymn in the fifth mandala, now we're in the fifth mandala of the Rig Veda, says that in whatever form he is seen, in the same form he is described, right? So this quotation is from Rig Veda 5:44.6, Yadrigeva dadrishe tadriguchete. So which in whichever form, what it's saying, in whichever form he is seen, that form he is spoken about, is what it's basically saying. Right? So it says here, what does it say? Whatever form he is seen, in that same form he is described. Right? So if we visualize God as fire, we say, "Oh Agni," like in the Upanishad, Agni Naisupatarayasman. So when we visualize, when we think about the quality of God as being a powerful like a fire, we call him "Oh Agni," like this. Right? But it is one Lord, it's one God, it is one Supreme Person, one Paratattva, who ultimately we describe as Vishnu, because Vishnu and Narayana, these names more aptly describe that one principle, that supreme principle, than the other forms. These other names describe only one aspect, but the most important aspect of God, of the Supreme God, is his all-pervasiveness. So the word Vishnu, the word Narayana, the word Vasudeva, these three words are called Vyapaka names. These are the most important names because they give us an understanding of God as the supreme, all-pervading person, like that. So, okay, so in the sixth mandala, right, we have come across statements such as, he is the one to whom the prayer is to be offered, corresponding to the Taittiriya Upanishadic text speaking of the one ultimate reality, right? And that quotation is from Rig Veda 6:45-16. Ya eka it tamushtuhi. And also Taittiriya Upanishad, sa ekaha saya evam vite. Right? So sa ekaha saya evam vite. Right? That is from Taittiriya Upanishad and also from Rig Veda 6:45-16. Right. So then in another text that speaks of the one ultimate reality. So another text in the same mandala explicitly points out that there is one monarch in the world, one monarch in the world. So that one monarch in the world spoken about in the Rig Veda 6, 36:4. Eko Vishvasya Bhuvanasya Raja. Raja. Those persons who know a little bit of Sanskrit, they understand. Eko is Ekaha, it means one. Vishvasya is the genitive singular of Vishva, meaning universe, right? Bhuvanasya also means this world, right? Bhuvana, right? Bhuvanasya is of this world, of the universe, right? Raja. Raja is equated to this person who is the one king of the world, is known as the king. The one is known as the king. He is the one monarch of the world, of the Bhuvanasya, of the Bhuvana, and of the Vishwa, of the universe, of the world and the universe. Right? He's called Raja. What we covered today is we covered the fact that some people feel that Hinduism or Vaishnavism or any of these groups is a polytheistic, and that they pray to many different gods. And the proof that some people have about that is they say, look, in the Vedas, there are so many different gods that are described. But the counterproof to that, we've just gone through, is that there are certain, the original commentators on the Vedas, Shayana, Shonaka, Yaksha, and even quotations from Mahabharata, which is considered to be the fifth Veda, and even quotations directly from the Veda itself prove that all of these different names, which are addressed to God in the Vedas, actually only mean one God, and there's one principle, one supreme principle, and the best way to address him is by the word Vishnu or Narayana or Vasudeva, which is his primary name, and that is what we should understand. So the principle of God is there, and he can be addressed by many different names, like Surya or Agni or whatever it is like that. But in fact, that applies to only one person, and that looking and thinking that these are all different people, different personalities, and not just the limbs of the Supreme, right, as qualities of the Supreme, this is only a very superficial understanding. So the Indologists who think that Hinduism or Vaishnavism is polytheistic, right, they're seeing only things in a very superficial way. They haven't gone deeply into the real understanding, the philosophical background of the Vedas in the Upanishads and the Mahabharata, or they haven't read the commentaries by the original commentators like Shonaka, Yaksha, Shayana, right? They haven't understood the Vedas by taking the explanations from the fifth Veda, the Mahabharata, and other Itihasas and Sattvic Puranas. So therefore, they're confused, and they think that Hinduism or Vaishnavism is polytheistic. It's not. It's monotheistic. It believes in one supreme principle, and that was the lesson that we're trying to learn today. And we're going to continue on next week, next time, giving more quotes that people can use to defeat this argument that Hinduism is polytheistic or Vaishnavism is polytheistic.